There is a certain comfort people feel around someone who never falls apart. A quiet relief, a sense that chaos will not spread too far if this person is in the room. They are the listener when voices tremble, the anchor when emotions spill, the one who stays calm while others unravel. Over time, this steadiness becomes expected, then relied upon, then assumed. No one notices when it stops being a choice, because the one who never falls apart learns something early and deeply, that their value is measured by how much they can carry without asking to be held. They learn that composure is praised, while need is inconvenient, that strength earns belonging faster than honesty ever could. So emotions are delayed, not denied, just postponed, saved for later moments that never truly arrive. Inside there is often no drama, just quiet pressure, a slow accumulation of unexpressed fear, grief, anger, and fatigue, stacked neatly behind a composed exterior. The world sees reliability, but rarely sees the cost, because being strong all the time does not feel like power. It feels like responsibility without rest, like being needed more than being known. And the most painful part is this. When someone never falls apart, people stop checking if they are okay. This is not a story about weakness. It is a story about endurance taken too far, about the invisible weight of emotional self-control, about what happens when strength becomes an identity, and the person beneath it quietly disappears. It rarely begins with a decision. No one wakes up and chooses to become the one who never falls apart. The role arrives quietly, in moments when someone else is overwhelmed and this person stays calm. When tears are expected, but composure appears instead. When chaos asks for a witness, and they remain steady. At first, it feels harmless, even admirable. People respond with trust, with relief. They lean closer. They exhale more easily. And without realizing it, strength becomes something others depend on. Soon, this person is no longer just someone who can handle things. They are the one who always handles things, the emotional constant in rooms filled with unpredictability. Recognition comes slowly, not through applause, but through absence. No one asks how they are doing. No one expects them to need help, because strength, once noticed, becomes assumed. Inside, there is often pride mixed with quiet fatigue, a belief that holding it together is what keeps relationships intact, that breaking down would disappoint people, that falling apart would create problems instead of solving them. So emotions are managed instead of expressed, filtered instead of felt. The identity solidifies. The strong one, the reliable one, the one who doesn't need saving. And this is where the story truly begins. Not with collapse, but with recognition. The realization that being seen as unbreakable can slowly make a person invisible to their own pain. Strength often begins as a response, not a trait. It forms in places where stability was uncertain, where emotions moved unpredictably, or safety depended on staying. composed. In early life, some people learn that calmness keeps things from getting worse, that being easy reduces conflict, that managing oneself is safer than asking others to manage anything for them. Sometimes it comes from being the oldest, sometimes from watching adults struggle, sometimes from environments where emotions were dismissed, ignored, or punished. In these moments, strength becomes a quiet agreement with the world. I will not add to the noise. Responsibility arrives early, not always spoken but deeply felt, a sense that holding things together is necessary for everyone else to function. Over time, this adaptation feels natural. Composure becomes instinct. Need becomes something private, even embarrassing. The child who learned to stay steady grows into an adult who rarely asks for help. Not because help is unnecessary, but because dependence feels unfamiliar. There is often no resentment at first, only a deep loyalty to the role that once kept everything from falling apart. But what once protected them slowly limits them, because the same strength that created safety also taught the nervous system to stay alert, controlled, and emotionally guarded. The origin of strength is rarely pride. It is survival, and understanding this origin changes the story. It reveals that the one who never falls apart was never trying to be impressive. They were simply trying to stay safe. What appears as strength on the surface is often regulation beneath it. The nervous system learns to stay controlled, measured, alert, not because emotions are absent, but because expression once felt risky. Psychologically, holding it together becomes a form of self-protection. Emotions are monitored before they reach the surface. Thoughts are filtered. Reactions are delayed. This is not repression in the dramatic sense. It is careful containment, a constant internal negotiation between what is felt and what is allowed to be shown. Over time, this pattern can turn into hyper-independence, the belief that relying on others is unsafe or unreliable, that needing support invites disappointment. The mind begins to equate control with safety, calm with worth, composure with emotional maturity. But the body keeps its own record. Unexpressed emotions do not disappear. They settle into tension, into fatigue that sleep does not resolve, into a quiet distance from one's own inner world. Psychology does not call this weakness. It calls it adaptation. The brain learned to prioritize stability over expression, to reduce emotional risk by minimizing visible need. And while this strategy once helped maintain order, it slowly narrows emotional range. The person still feels deeply. They just feel alone while doing so, because when holding it together becomes automatic, even the self forgets how to safely let go. There comes a point where strength begins to feel heavy. Not dramatic, just quietly exhausting. On the outside, everything still looks stable. Responsibilities are met. Emotions are managed. Life continues without visible crack. But inside, something starts to separate. The person who holds everything together rarely feels held. They listen, but are not listened to. They support but are not supported in the same way. This creates a subtle fracture, not between people, but within the self. One part remains capable, dependable, composed. The other grows tired, unseen, emotionally unattended. There is often guilt attached to this exhaustion, a belief that feeling overwhelmed is a personal failure, that struggling would contradict the identity that others trust. So discomfort is minimized, loneliness is rationalized, emotional hunger is ignored. Resentment may appear quietly, not toward others but toward the role itself, toward the expectation of endless stability. And yet, stepping out of the role feels dangerous, because if strength disappears, what replaces it? Who remains when the dependable one rests? This is the inner conflict of the one who never falls apart. The fear that vulnerability will collapse relationship, that softness will disappoint. So the fracture remains internal, invisible, growing slowly, because the strongest walls are often built around the parts that most need to be seen. Strength rarely collapses all at once. It erodes, quietly. There may be no dramatic breakdown, no visible moment where everything spills over. Instead, there is numbness, a dullness where emotion once lived. The person still functions, still shows up, still holds space for others. But something has changed. Joy feels distant. Sadness feels muted. Even exhaustion feels familiar, almost expected. This is often misunderstood as resilience, but it is closer to depletion. The body begins to signal what the mind has ignored. Sleep no longer restores. Silence feels heavier than noise. Being alone feels less like rest and more like emptiness. There is a quiet realization here, not spoken aloud, just felt, that never falling apart has come at a cost. That control has replaced connection. That strength has outlived its purpose. This moment is not failure. It is information, a message that the old way of surviving is no longer enough for living. The illusion breaks gently, not with chaos but with awareness. The person begins to sense that holding everything together is not the same as being whole, and in that recognition something shifts. Not outwardly, but inwardly. When the old definition of strength begins to loosen, there is often uncertainty, because control once felt like safety. Letting go does not happen suddenly. It arrives in small internal permissions, moments where emotions are allowed to exist without correction, where exhaustion is acknowledged instead of dismissed. This new strength is quieter, less impressive, but more honest. It does not demand constant composure. It allows contradiction, calm and fear, capability and need. Psychologically, this shift is not about becoming fragile. It is about becoming integrated. The nervous system no longer has to stay on guard. Expression is no longer a threat. There is relief in discovering that vulnerability does not erase reliability, that softness does not dismantle respect, that being seen does not automatically lead to abandonment. The person begins to experience themselves more fully, not just as a support system for others, but as someone with internal weather. This strength is not performative. It does not seek approval. It is rooted in self-recognition. There is still steadiness here, but it breathes, it bends, and for the first time, falling apart no longer feels like danger. It feels like honesty, because true strength is not the absence of cracks. It is the ability to exist with them, without disappearing from oneself. Wholeness does not arrive with perfection. It arrives with permission. The permission to feel without managing every response, to rest without explaining, to be present without holding everything together. In this place, strength no longer dominates the identity. It becomes one quality among many. Softness stands beside it. So does uncertainty. There is a quiet peace in no longer performing stability, in allowing moments of collapse without fear of losing worth. Because falling apart, when allowed, does not destroy the self. It reveals it. The one who never fell apart begins to feel something unfamiliar. Being held without proving usefulness. Being listened to without translating emotions into solutions. Control fades, not into chaos, but into balance. Life becomes less about endurance, and more about presence. The inner world expands again. Emotions move freely, without urgency or shame. Silence feels safe. Connection feels mutual. This is not an ending marked by certainty. It is marked by gentleness. The person is no longer defined by how much they can carry. They are defined by their ability to exist fully, without disappearing behind strength. And in this quiet integration, something profound becomes clear. The one who never fell apart was always human. They just needed space to finally feel like one.